You can't handle the truth.
Welcome to Truth versus News on July 6th. We all survived July 4th intact, pretty much. A little bit wild, but other than that, we're here. And it's just great to have a show. And so glad to welcome you. My name is Donald Running, producer right down here in Tahiti. Just having a great time, but it's fun to get back to work here. Got Scott Bennett and James Spencer, the most dangerous mind in America. They're just here to share it all. So let's go for it here. We've been going for almost 4 years now, and I think things just get more relevant as we get closer to this new election. So let's start off at Mount Rushmore. What do you say, Jim?
Well, the Democrats have been demonizing Mount Rushmore. It's about as insane as it gets. Certainly highly un-American, undemocratic. It's bizarre. According to the Democrats, Trump has disrespected Native communities time and time again, attempting to limit their voting rights, blocking critical pandemic relief. Now he's holding a rally glorifying white supremacy at Mount Rushmore, a region once sacred to tribal communities. This is disgusting beyond belief. Trump speaks at Mount Rushmore on patriotism and American greatness. The New York Times calls it a dark and divisive speech. I listened to every word. It was inspiring, uplifting, and unifying, the precise opposite of dark and divisive. Why would they say that? No doubt because Trump's defending a nation they hate. Trump has also stated he would create a statuary park honoring American heroes, including John Adams, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King Jr., Billy Graham, Antonin Scalia, Ronald Reagan, and others. The White House has issued the executive order shortly after he gave his speech at Mount Rushmore, denouncing recent acts by anti-racism protesters who destroyed or defaced national monuments. The order declares he will not abide an assault on our collective national memory, for which I applaud him wholeheartedly. This is a good idea to go forward, creating a National Heroes Garden. The fireworks were spectacular. The setting was sensational, and yet here you have a CNN reporter calling Mount Rushmore a monument of two slave owners on land wrestled away from Native Americans. This is bizarre, extreme, extraordinary. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, I think the speech at Mount Rushmore, the pageantry, the fireworks, and the fact that it was at Mount Rushmore was a hallmark of the Trump presidency. It was a symbol to Americans who value safety, freedom, prosperity, the Constitution, law and order, that under the watchful eyes of George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Thomas Jefferson, we are being called to stand against the forces of tyranny and madness and delusion, and that's how to describe the left. So I think his choice at Mount Rushmore was excellent. The speech was excellent. The diversity needed, of course, is more, people of color and Native Americans showing support too. So I think the left is just increasingly making themselves alienated and divorced from reality, and the people of this country are seeing that. I was delighted, Jim, to see that he's listening to certain people making suggestions, because when I heard him make the commentary on the Garden of Statues, I thought, where did we hear that before? I think someone else was talking all about that. Maybe it was Jim Fetzer, Scott Bennett, and Don Grahn last year. Oh, yeah, that's right. So I was delighted to hear him say that, because however he got the information, the substance matters, and that is, we will not allow our statues, our heritage, our historical memory of this country to be lobotomized, burned, and destroyed and left into a wasteland, as T.S. Eliot might describe. Instead, we are going to defend them with 10-year prison sentences for anarchist terrorists, and we are also going to safely deposit them in a repository of art and nobility. You know, one of the things we just saw too this weekend, Christopher Columbus statues being beheaded and things like that. How the supreme arrogance behind these morons who are doing this is I mean, baffling even for American standards, because when you're destroying statues, you're going back in time and destroying and desecrating the people and the ideas at the time that these were erected and positioned. No one in this country ever erected a statue of Christopher Columbus or George Washington or Ulysses S. Grant for any other purpose other than to elevate the virtue and the nobility and the leadership and the character of those men, and the boldness and the you know, the just the entire spirit behind them. And it's disgusting when people go in and destroy them, because you're going back in time and desecrating the men and women who did not share your values. And that's an exercise really in imagination, to go back and say, what would the people around the time of the creation of these statues, what would they say to the left-wing anarchists? What would they say to these foolish, narcissistic, you know, paranoid people that are so sensitive to political correctness, this religion of madness, that they engage in this? What would they say? They would probably rise up and defeat them philosophically, and they'd also recognize the Marxist communist tendencies. This has got nothing to do with black people. This has got everything to do with tearing down and destroying America in order to advance a Marxist, communist, socialist ideology of madness. And I don't think that'll ever take root. And in fact, it'll result in the greatest defeat the Democrats have ever known in the history of their party. Jim?
Yes, Don, your thoughts?
Well, I just say that Mount Rushmore is such a fantastic piece of art. I mean, I don't know if anybody ever want to touch it or anything else. And yes, every person that has ever walked this earth has feet of clay, and they're not perfect at all, but some of the people have done some amazing things to get us where we are in a world that's supposed to be free and democratic and republic and all for liberty and things. But right now it seems like we're on the verge of being either anarchists or under tyranny in this country, and pulling us out of this. But let's stand strong for what these men stood for.
Don, you're absolutely right. Every one of us has our own flaws. We celebrate them for their achievements.
That's right.
Not that they were claiming they were perfect human beings. So this is really a bizarre attack upon the history of America and the figures who have made the most significant achievements to establishing who we are as a people. Amen. With all of our efforts to, you know, compensate for our shortcomings, which continue to persevere. This is insulting beyond belief. Meanwhile, Melania, I thought, looked wonderful in this unusual address, but it was very much attacked on the social media, making fun over her designer dress, declaring it was a white ivory fabric with black sketches, looked like Trump had doodled on it. They didn't pay attention to what it represented. In fact, this was drawings by victims of sexual abuse or satanic ritual abuse by children. The dress was created to honor them, to respect them. And I believe it also was meant to transmit a message about what may be coming. It was a wonderful gesture. Meanwhile, Alan Dershowitz, I hope Epstein made videos, as though there were any doubt. There have been suggestions that Epstein made secret videos of all the men who had sex in his houses and planes. I hope he did. And they're all revealed, because they will prove I am not among them. I hereby waive any right of privacy in Epstein videos. That's a pretty good gesture on the part of Alan Dershowitz, where we know now that this was a Mossad operation, that Ghislaine Maxwell even appears to have been a Mossad operations officer herself. She may confront a death penalty by being taken out if she's not provided adequate protection from the deep state that wants to silence her. and where I gave a very extensive 2-hour presentation on Pizzagate, but up to and including the role of Jeffrey Epstein and Giselle Maxwell on the conspiracy guy last week, which is very, very difficult to deal with.
Yes.
And I wish I didn't have to report it, but which every adult American needs to understand and appreciate. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Jim, not to get off track, but Russia had its constitutional amendment votes and such. And I noticed that Russia has anti-pornography laws. If you produce, if you disseminate pornography, you can spend, I think it's 6 years in jail. That's a wonderful law. That's a wonderful testament to the family and marriage and natural sexuality and the spirituality behind that. That's a beautiful thing. And I'm ashamed that this country has degenerated and lost that understanding, but Russia still has it. They have an anti-pornography law. In fact, they were threatening of prosecuting a couple lesbians that were up there throwing up, you know, gay propaganda and rainbow flags. And they've outlawed gay propaganda in Russia. They've outlawed pornography. They've of course outlawed a lot of the things that has been the corrosive of human civilization: homosexuality, lesbian, transgenderism, sexual schizophrenia. It is the corrosive of human civilization and the identity of the person. It was also deemed to be a psychological imbalance, problem, deficiency, psychological problem. Don probably knows this too, back in the 70s, until it was changed by the American Psychological Association. So I think Russia has a lot to teach the West, and Britain is falling apart because of it too. But there are countries that's still held high. I think even China outlaws that sort of aberrant, abnormal, unnatural behavior. And it's a sign of the times. If we do not rid ourselves of this foolish, politically correct ideology, it leads to the things that you're addressing. It leads to pedophilia. It leads to the rape and the suffering of children. It leads to human trafficking. The dress that Melania is wearing, I hope it is a symbolic gesture for what impending executive orders, prosecutions, arrests, and the executions are coming for these people. Dershowitz, in his testament of he's not on any of the videos, he hopes it all released. That is a powerful statement of his confidence that he's not been in any compromising positions. I find it very difficult because of the nature of the airplane that Epstein had and these young girls on the airplane. But who knows? But you know, on a deeper level, I've studied this. I studied it at the Heritage Foundation, at Family Research Council when I was in the government with HHS in the Bush administration, and the sexual, family, marital dimension is the key to determining either a living, thriving, prospering, flourishing society or a decadent, insane, degenerative, violent society. And women are always the primary victims of these things, and children. And we don't need to go into all the adrenochrome and the torturing of children to the point where their body floods with adrenaline, in which case the adrenaline-rich blood is then removed and used as a youth enhancement, which others have been videotaped admitting to, like Sandra Bullock on the Ellen DeGenerate show. This country is full of these cancers, and as one of my old bosses said, pornography is to sex what cancer is to the normal cell. And we've been riddled with pornography and all of the derivative behaviors and corrosives, and it is fragmenting the society, destroying the society. That's why you also have a lot of these left-wing lunatic, anarchist, Antifa types. At the core, there's a very deep psychological, sexual schizophrenia and an inability to know oneself that has been reinforced by the public education system as a political right. You have a right to be insane. You have a right to have sex with a dog. You have a right to have a sex change operation and run in opposite sex races. And anybody who says you don't is a bigot, a racist, and a hateful person. That's the crux of the death of this country, and it may also be the only opportunity we have to resurrect ourselves. But the pornography and all these things you're pointing to, and Petagate and Melania's dress, that intimates to me that President Trump is on board and understands the problem and is about to solve it. Jim?
I agree. Your thoughts, Don?
No, I don't really have anything to add to that. I mean, the pornography and things, it's just not right. And like you said, when it leads to this Pizzagate and other outrageous things that I can't imagine any human with any kind of a feeling would ever think of or do. It's just, oh, let's get back to the basics. I think let's stand on the truth and life and love.
Meanwhile, we have confirmed coronavirus cases rising in 40 of 50 states. This appears to be a manufactured result.
Right.
A combined 25,000 new confirmed coronavirus cases as the infection curve rises in 40 of 50 states. Here you see the curves of the increased numbers. In only one case is it going down rather than up, identified or shaded in green. I wrote a letter to the Wisconsin State Journal, which of course they have declined to publish, about the fallacy of ambiguity involved here. Editor, most readers assume that your lead stories, as more people get sick, restrictions tighten again, and big spike in COVID cases, nationwide forces retreat, are about the same thing, but they would be mistaken. The big spike concerns test outcomes for having the CV virus, but that is not the same thing as getting sick. Almost all of us have one CV virus or another, but we are not therefore showing symptoms or sick. Coronavirus is a genus of which the CV is a species. The common cold virus, for example, is a coronavirus, but our leading experts, such as Dr. Anthony Fauci, are not explaining the difference to the public.
Right.
Countries, states, and cities that have not locked down are doing at least as well as those that have. And those that have used HCQ are doing the best of all, which Fauci has known since 2005 that HCQ is a wonder drug for CV. An article that year in Virology, a publication of NIH, of which he is a director, explained that it works as both a cure if you have it and a preventative if you don't. What this means is that nobody had to die from CV. Right. Nobody. The governors of Florida, Texas, and California do not understand the difference because deaths are not climbing, but numbers with the virus are increasing. The death rate from CV continues to fall. The threat posed by CV is no greater than the seasonal flu.
Right.
Meanwhile, Trump tweeted, in a certain way, our tremendous testing success gives the fake news media all they want, cases. In the meantime, deaths and the all-important mortality rate goes down. You won't hear about that from the fake news, and you never will. Anybody need any ventilators?
No.
Right on top of it, here's a chart showing what's actually going on. The deaths are diminishing to virtually zero, while the number of cases is going up, meaning the death rate is virtually disappearing. Meanwhile, we've all turned from normal human beings into muzzled masochists. When this madness began, I behaved as if a new and fanatical religion was spreading among us. Be polite and tolerant, I thought. It may be crazy and damaging, but in time it will go away. Now it is clear that a new faith, based on fear of the invisible and quite immune to reason, has all but taken over the country. And it turns out to be one of those faiths that doesn't have much tolerance for those who don't share it.
All right.
Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's remarkable the quasi-religiosity that's beginning to be unleashed and seen in many of these beta male, average, below average individuals. And you see it at every level, at, you know, coffee shops, grocery stores, with a checkout kid who I almost knocked through a wall when he said, "You need to pull your mask up." I had this mask on right but below my nose. And I just looked at him, because there's no way in hell I'm going to put a mask above my nose and start breathing in my own excrement from my lungs. So I just looked at him. And these are signs of a totally unbalanced society. But there are people that like that. There are people that live in fear. There are people that live in fear and are defined by fear, that want everybody to be the same. And that's what's at root behind a lot of the social movement of people in this direction of paranoia over masks. But let me just say again, we'll have the video on at the appropriate time. And Judge Napolitano this morning gave an interview on Fox News in which he described the government's inability, constitutional lack of authority to order anyone to wear masks on the street. It cannot quarantine people without due process of law. So all of these actions are the whims of Democrat governors. And I thought it was a powerful interview. And I'm sure Don will insert it around this point and play it for about 5 minutes or so. And I think it's going to carve out sections of the country that people are just not even going to recognize these anymore. They're not going to wear masks. They're not going to tolerate masks. And you may have a fracturing of the country over this, but it is a quasi-religion based on completely faulty medical science that other doctors have said too. The herd immunity and the ability to build up one's immune system is the key to defeating this, not masks. Jim?
Don, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'd say that the herd immunity is working. You see it in Sweden. Sweden has a very low death rate now. The death rates are really going quite down. I do take the statistics here every day. I've done it since March 14th, and it's quite revealing, and I should get things plotted out, but deaths are going way down, especially in Washington, when we have reported 2 deaths in a day in Washington State. In California, by the way, you have so many people there that your percentages are way down too. Your deaths per case are down to 2.7. Ours is at 3.1 here. So anyway, the deaths, that's what's critical. Sure, everybody has had a cold. Most people have coronavirus. Most everybody has symptoms, but you asymptomatic, if you don't have symptoms, you're not infectious. You can't spread it, and that's been confirmed by who? The World Health Organization just confirmed that. So this is no more dangerous than a flu, and social distancing and masks and everything else are not necessary at this time at all. We should go back to whatever normal we had before, restore the economy, restore everything, and get these tyrant mayors and governors that we have here, especially in Washington. You can show them the door right now. That's my thought.
A rapper has slammed Black Lives Matter, not our movement. It's George Soros' plan. Rapper Lord Jamar is causing a stir with a viral video accusing the Black Lives Matter movement of being a foreign plot created by anti-American billionaire George Soros, who's declared his objective to destroy the United States. The rapper said the Black Lives Matter movement was created not by Black people. I'm not a Black Lives Matter supporter. No, absolutely not, because it's not our movement. This is a movement that was given to us by, George Soros and his boys, because they saw how things were going and they didn't want to go back to the 60s where we started having our own organic movements. Meanwhile, in Oklahoma, rioters are being charged with terrorism. We don't tolerate lawlessness. This isn't Seattle. Right. Oklahoma County, the district attorney David Prater announced the charges, suggesting such harsh penalties would be a deterrent to future crimes, charges of terrorism, rioting, and assault. This is not Seattle, declared Prater. We're not putting up with this lawlessness here. Good. I congratulate him, as does Tammy Bruce. Good. We need more of this everywhere. This is not Seattle. Oklahoma protesters hit with terrorism charges. Meanwhile, a police officer mocks defund the police protesters after they request security.
Yep.
A viral video posted to TikTok showed an officer having a good laugh over a group of defund the police protesters requesting police security for their event. So I come in this morning, we're informed there's going to be a protest to defund the police. Well, that's fine. I like protests, he said, except they requested a police presence, for their safety at the defund the police event. Honey says, I-S-H-I-T-U not. Meanwhile, the Black national anthem to be sung at NFL games this year was written by a Black Republican who denounced Democrats for lynching blacks. According to Grand Old Partisan in 1900, James Weldon Johnson wrote the poem, Lift Every Voice and Sing to honor Republican activist Booker T. Washington when the civil rights leader visited his school. Meanwhile, taking the knee turns out to be a Freemasonic ritual. As David Icke has observed, I'm not sure that Colin Kaepernick recognizes that relationship, but he's becoming more outspoken and critical of the government, and I'm beginning to lose confidence in him. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, you're seeing the face of disloyalty, rejection of the United States, rejection of what it means to be an American. There are just really, we're breaking down into there's multiculturalism. This is the fruit of multiculturalism. This is what happens when you have an educational system growing people up to believe that African American studies and Asian American studies or feminist studies or all of these define you, and you can't be defined as anything else, and you're a victim, and it's you against your victimizer. It's divide and conquer, splitting the country, and you see that in Kaepernick, you see that in these militant Black Lives Matter puppets that have bought into the idea, and many of them are waking up, like this rapper gentleman who's citing that this is a George Soros creation. And I think that's going to take a root. I think you're going to have people waking up to that fact that this is not a organic, original pro-Black movement. This is, in fact, a terrorist tactic that is being deployed by far leftists with a color revolution, regime change agenda over America on their minds. Jim?
Good. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization admits China never reported a coronavirus outbreak. This is remarkable because in the past they praised China for being so open about it. The World Health Organization has backtracked on its claim that China alerted the International Public Health Agency about the initial coronavirus outbreak. The WHO now admits China never notified them about the onset of the deadly disease. This is stunning. The WHO updated its timeline of WHO's response to COVID-19 on Tuesday, stating on December 13th, the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission, China, reported a cluster of cases of pneumonia in Wuhan. That was the initial timeline. It's now been changed to read WHO's country office in the People's Republic of China picked up a media statement by the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission from their website on cases of viral pneumonia in Wuhan on December 31st. Taiwan claims it emailed WHO on December 31st to request information on the outbreak, asked if the virus could be transmitted between people. Taiwan, not a WHO member, alleged the WHO never replied. In April, only 4 months later, WHO responded to Taiwan's allegation by saying, we have asked how they communicated this to us because we're only aware that one email makes no mention of human-to-human transmission, but they haven't replied, passing the buck. Meanwhile, the question becomes, who is this guy who's the director of WHO? He looks as though he's a terrorist, global ties to Bill Gates, the Clinton Foundation, Dr. Anthony Tony the Rat Fauci, China, and genocide. This is not a good guy. He's not even a doctor. He does have a Bachelor of Science in Biology, a PhD in Community Health from North Nottingham in the UK, but he is not an MD. He was further associated with the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton AIDS Initiative, Smiling and poised, he's portrayed as a humble, compassionate figure, a benefactor to humanity, dedicated to his heavy responsibilities. But it turns out his political career began at the Politburo of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, a terrorist organization of the Tigray minority ethnic group, 6% of the Ethiopian population, listed in the U.S. Homeland Security Global Terrorism Database for a series of kidnappings, bombings, and armed robberies.
Oh.
Meanwhile, and this is
Well, Sandra, with extensive public mandates in place regarding the coronavirus, there are some concerns that it could impinge on civil liberties. Judge Andrew Napolitano joins us on that. He is a senior Fox News judicial analyst and host of Liberty File on Fox Nation. So, Judge, we saw the protests. Some people refuse to wear masks and take precautions medical experts recommend. What is your worry?
Well, Eric, good morning. It's always a pleasure to be with you, my dear friend. My worry is that we are being squeezed on both sides. On one side, we have anarchy in various parts of the country. We have police whose hands are tied because the politicians are restraining the police because the forces of anarchy form part of the political base of those politicians. On the other side of this equation is we have tyrannical behavior by governors who are shutting down legitimate businesses, preventing people from traveling and assembling in utter violation of the Bill of Rights. So we have two extremes, often, Eric, by the same people. It is often the same leftish governors like Murphy in New Jersey and Cuomo in New York who are most aggressive about telling people how to live, but will look the other way when political demonstrations of which they approve are happening. I'm all for political demonstrations. I'm an iconoclast myself many times politically. But what happened in Seattle, where the police were prevented from protecting lives and property by politicians who wanted the support of those attacking lives and destroying property, simply is not acceptable. And these two extremes of anarchy on one hand and tyranny on the other will have terrible consequences. It'll either bring about vigilantism or martial law, and neither of those is the America we want to celebrate and thought we were celebrating on the 4th of July.
It's certainly not the America that we love and know, the founding tenets of this nation. You mentioned Murphy, the governor of New Jersey. Here is Phil Murphy talking about precautions. Let's listen.
It's become almost not even debatable. Certainly when you're going out, and absolutely indoors. As I mentioned, this virus is a lot more lethal inside than outside. But if you're leaving your house, put on a mask. I think it ought to be a national requirement.
He's talking about wearing masks. Should it be a national, mandate all over the country?
Well, it should be a personal decision. The same governor who says it should be a national mandate obviously has very little understanding of the Constitution. This is the same governor, Eric, that told our colleague Tucker Carlson that the Bill of Rights was above his pay grade. The federal government has no authority, none, to compel the wearing of a mask in public. It can compel certain behavior on property that it owns, but it doesn't own the public streets, and it can't tell you how to dress and how to care for yourself in your home or when you're traveling. This is the same governor who, after saying he was going to open restaurants for indoor dining with social distancing, at the last minute closed them and then dined himself inside a restaurant down the Jersey Shore. So he has very little credibility with people who are concerned not only with health but also with liberty.
But then, Judge, what about the argument that someone who may be infected and not know it, asymptomatic, they don't have a right to infect someone else if they refuse to wear a mask? Someone walking down the street doesn't have a right to infect me or you because they refuse to, let's say, wear a mask.
There's no authority for the states or the federal government to quarantine people who are healthy who are asymptomatic. Of course, no one has the right to infect us. But if anybody is that concerned about infection, that someone walking down the street confronting them might infect them, then they should get off the street. The government can't take away liberty without due process, and it can't punish people who have violated what is merely a gubernatorial whim and not a law enacted by a legislature. Because if the government can get away with this, if the government, which enjoys using this kind of power, decides not to return it when the pandemic is gone, what do we do then?
That is the question of the day. Judge Napolitano, my dear friend, who always has such terrific insight and analysis and raises some very chilling questions today. Judge, always great to see you.
Profoundly disturbing. Chinese city sounds a law alert after it records suspected case of bubonic plague. Bubonic plague, one of the more serious types of plague with the bacteria. The symptoms include fever, headache, and vomiting, swelling, and painful lymph nodes, areas closest to where it entered the sim. Sometimes the lymph nodes break open. It's a really, truly ghastly disease. It also has been responsible for one of the greatest pandemics in world history, the Black Death, also known as the pestilence and the Great Mortality. Most fatal pandemic of human history, resulted in deaths of between 75 and 200 million people in Eurasia, North Africa, peaking in Europe from 1347 to 1351. Plague, the disease caused by the bacterium, was the cause, most commonly resulting in bubonic plague. The beginning of the second plague pandemic was the Black Death. The plague created religious, social, and economic upheavals with profound effects in the course of European history. It most likely originated in Central or East Asia, from where it traveled along the Silk Road, reaching Crimea by 1347. From there, it was most likely carried by fleas living on the black rats that traveled on Genoese merchant ships, spreading throughout the Mediterranean basin and reaching Africa, West Asia, and the rest of Europe via Constantinople, Sicily, and the Italian peninsula. Current evidence indicates once it came on shore, the Black Death was in large part spread by human fleas, which caused pneumonic plague and the person-to-person contact via aerosols, which pneumonic plague enables. That's explained the very fast inland spread of the epidemic. Absolutely stunning stuff, which frankly, it would not surprise me that they're upping the ante here because the COVID virus hasn't proven to be very effective to achieve their goals. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, many have attributed the infectious rate of the COVID virus is proportional to the level of living conditions, squalor, unkemptness, uncleanliness. You have certain minority groups, for example, that cluster and live 10 people to a room, and the transmissibility of any sort of infection can explain a lot of the explosion within certain groups. So, you know, there's a lot of material out there on the COVID thing. I think moving forward, you're going to see it just kind of dissipate. You're going to see it evaporate. You're going to see it, really become nothing, because the leaders in society, the intelligent people in society, look at something like that and say, you know what, we were told by a bunch of lying government workers, lying bureaucrats, lying media of the hysteria of this. I've never gotten sick. No relative of mine has gotten sick. No relative of a relative, no friend of a relative has gotten sick. So all of this is really more propaganda than it is reality. And people are beginning to come to that conclusion. The problem is they come to the conclusion and they move on to the next patch of grass for the sheeple to graze upon, rather than turning around and looking at who just lied to them and like a ram going after them and knocking them off the cliff. That's where the hostility and the political rage and the righteous indignation needs to be erupted and channeled towards. Otherwise, you're simply going to have a repeat. When you're attacked from behind, you don't just, quicken your trot and, just go grazing somewhere else, because it is going to catch up to you. They're going to do this again. So you have to confront these liars and the propagandists and use the Constitution to do that. That's once again why we're coming to a point in this country where the Constitution defines what we do, defines our rights, defines our freedoms, not the governors, not the police, not the legislature, the Constitution. And that's also why I think in your previous story, Jim, you're going to see district attorneys in areas of this country having a zero tolerance for these anarchist, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, Marxist, communist thugs tearing down statues and burning and rioting. They're going to be charged as domestic terrorists. They're going to be given 10-year terms, and perhaps some need to be executed. That's where I think American society in certain clusters are going. You're going to have also the dead zones. You had like 17 people killed this past 4th of July weekend in Chicago. Why is that? Because it's all blacks killing blacks. It's not the blacks killing Chinese or the Koreans killing whites, or it's blacks killing blacks. That's always the highest statistical block of criminal behavior. And you can chart up, why the reasons are, but the facts are the facts. So you're having dead zones. You're having the dead zones really turned into nuclear waste areas because you are shutting down the police. You are defunding the police in these areas. And I don't think that's going to bode well for these black areas, these minority areas where they're already impoverished. That's mostly where the police are called. The police aren't called into suburban homes and regulated areas, except for, an occasional domestic violence. But for the most part, the plague of criminality afflicts these zones precisely where the police have been defunded and removed. That means you're going to have a gradual predatory escalation of crime and a festering wound that I don't think that the country is going to give resources and attention to solving. As strange as that sounds, I think they're just going to let them die of the bubonic plague of stupidity, political correctness, and idiocy. And we'll just forget some of these areas like ghost towns of the Old West. And I think you very well could see pockets of Chicago, Detroit, New York turn into exactly that, especially Harlem. Jim?
Yeah, I think you're right. Spot on, Scott. This is going to be most harmful to the black community. They did an interview with various residents of Harlem, and one said it would be suicide to defund the police. Suicide, because as you observed, the black-on-black murder rate is astronomical compared to any other. In particular, white on black is minuscule. Don, your thoughts?
Yeah, it is black on black, I'm afraid so, folks. And in order to be politically correct, they're probably going to have to rename that Black Plague. They can't have that name for that anymore. But that aside, yes, and the media is not reporting what's really going on satisfactorily. They definitely have a slant, and that's not right. So we're here with truth and giving you what's really going on here. So share this widely. By the way, I'll let you know that we're no longer on TV in Seattle, and so we're just on the internet now. So we're looking for new platforms and other places to go. So if you have any insights as to how we can get our material out farther than ever, let us know, because this has got to go around the world. I think we have the truth, and that's why. I think that's one of the reasons why Seattle shut down our channel.
Scott, just as you were observing, Judge Napolitano has been very outspoken.
Yep.
Governments do not have the authority to mandate mask wearing. Judge Andrew Napolitano said Monday, federal and state governments do not have the authority to mandate the wearing of face masks. Prominent Democrats, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden, have in some form or other supported a federal mask wearing mandate. Biden has even declared if he were to become president, he would issue one by executive order. However, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution reserves matters of public health and safety to the states. But even they lack the authority to mandate masks anywhere but on state property. The federal government certainly can't do it because the federal government is not charged with public health or public safety. It's an area reserved by the 10th Amendment of the Constitution to the states. And that brings us to whether the states have the authority, and the answer again is no. If a person is known to be contagious, the state could require that person to be quarantined to wear a mask. But anything short of that, the state cannot interfere with that person's freedom of movement or freedom to wear or not wear a mask. So the government's authority is really rather limited here, no matter how aggressive the pandemic has become. When he was asked comparing face mask requirements to seatbelt requirements, he said, seatbelts are mandated on government property and for the use of a deadly weapon. So let me modify slightly what I said. The federal government could compel wearing masks on federal property, a military facility, the post office, government buildings, and state government could compel wearing masks on state property, the DMV, state colleges, things like that. But on property the government does not own, the feds have no authority to compel wearing a mask, and the states can only compel it when people are sick. Meanwhile, new hydroxychloroquine study has vindicated the president and should end Dr. Anthony Tony the Rat Fauci's career. A new hydroxychloroquine study conducted by the Henry Ford Health System revealed hydroxychloroquine successfully lowered the death rate among hospitalized COVID-19 patients by a significant mortality. It cut the rate by half.
Yep.
The study examined 2,541 patients who had been hospitalized in 6 hospitals between March 10th and May 2nd. More than 26%, 26.4%, who did not receive hydroxychloroquine died. However, among those who received hydroxychloroquine, fewer than half, 13%, died. More than 90% of the patients received hydroxychloroquine within 48 hours of admission to the hospital. Scientists say giving the drug early may be the key to success. Meanwhile, a man who correctly predicted Trump's 2016 win over Hillary Clinton predicts he has a 91% chance of being reelected. He had previously predicted over Hillary with an 87%, and he was essentially the only one to make this prediction. He has a model that tracks cyclic movements in American presidential elections that goes back to 1828, when popular voting became widespread and the two-party system took hold. Over nearly 2 centuries, American presidential elections have exhibited a distinct cycle, not the pattern associated with partisan realignments that may last 30 years or so, but a shorter cycle relating to party control of the White House. He made the prediction in March. He still stands by it. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, that is refreshing news, and I certainly agree with him. I think Trump does have a very high probability of winning against Biden if Biden was the nominee, because Biden is a stuttering, dementia, Alzheimer-afflicted, mad cow disease victim who has got really no brain left, except a few strings that are attached to him that move him in the direction of his handlers. But I personally still have money on the number that they're going to assassinate Biden and replace him with someone else at the last minute, blame it on someone from the Trump campaign so that they can guilt trip America into not voting, not showing up for Trump, and voting for whatever lesbian, transgender, far left lunatic that they nominate, be it the transvestite Michelle Obama or Michael LaVaughn Robinson or Gavin Newsom or Susan Rice is now reaching up. I think a Manchurian candidate scenario is the only hope that they have in their warped, perverted minds. That's their only hope for winning, is to try and guilt trip America into doing it for Uncle Joe, who's now dead from whatever assassination means they're going to play for him. But that's my prediction, that they're going to get rid of Biden, because he just simply can't win, Jim. He's only going to deteriorate more and more. He could wet his pants, defecate on himself, and start looking for a baby pacifier to stick in his mouth when he gets on the debate stage. Nothing's off the table for Joe Biden. And, all that needs to be said and replayed in video evidence for Trump is clips of Biden saying, I'm going to mandate masks. I'm going to mandate every American wear masks. Trump just will say, I'm not. I'm not. You're going to be free. If you want to wear a mask, fine. If you don't, that's fine too. I am not going to turn this country into a federal police state. He will. He's already said it. He admits it. He's going to force you to wear a mask. Right there, he's lost the election, because more than half the population are not going to wear masks. They're going to say to hell with everybody who tries to say we do, irregardless of the disease and the flu and COVID-19, because it's not about that anymore. It's about liberty. It's about liberty and freedom of choice, and the instinctive understanding that if we surrender to the mask-wearing fascists, then it's only a matter of time before all the other liberties are licensed or curtailed or restricted or outlawed. People know that instinctively, and that's why there's such opposition to this tyranny of masks. That's why in Los Angeles and California, you had record numbers of fireworks going off this past weekend, because people were flipping the middle finger of symbolism towards the mayor of Los Angeles and saying, hell with you. We're going to celebrate the 4th of July with 4th of July fireworks because we can, and we're not going to bow down to tyranny. So that's why you had more fireworks in California than ever before, despite the executive order by the governor to say there's none allowed. That you're seeing people just dismissively look away from these lanyard-wearing, lapel pin stuck politicians who think that makes them a leader. It doesn't. People are recognizing them. They're recognizing the Democrats for the fascists they are, and they're rejecting them. So Trump has everything. This is his election to lose, and the only thing he needs to do is make it about freedom and choice and protecting America, where Biden is about transforming America. He just said that. I will fundamentally transform America. Nobody is going to allow him to transform. Those are fighting words. That's what causes people to lock and load their weapons and say, to hell, you're going to transform me, my family, my property, or anything else. But that's the kind of mentality that Democrats are always afflicted with. Fundamental fascism, the brute force of government, and the lobotomization of law to compel everybody to be the same color, class, and mental retard of misery and fear. That's what the Democrats want. That's their soul, but I don't think it's the American people's. Jim?
Don, your thoughts?
Oh, Scott's just right on. And yeah, I'll say that it sure was good to see a lot of fireworks going off in spite of the edicts from the so-called leaders that we have who are watching out for our safety and security and health and things, to the point of making it a tyrannical edicts and things. They really do not have any right under the Constitution or Bill of Rights. They can't stop our breathing or other things. So we're right, and we got to stand up for our rights. Otherwise, we're going to bow down and kiss some feet, and that's not what I want to do.
Thanks, Don. Meanwhile, Trump, Russia bounty allegations are fake news. Surprise, surprise. President Trump dismisses fake news allegations that Russia offered bounties for killing American troops in Afghanistan. He said news stories about the allegation were made up to damage him and the Republican Party. Lawmakers have been demanding answers over the allegation. Democrats have accused Trump of bowing to Russian President Putin at the risk of U.S. soldiers' lives. The Pentagon, however, says there is no corroborating evidence to stand up, to support the New York Times report on the Russian boundaries. Senator Kristen Gillibrand, who's an airhead, a vacuous brain if ever there were one, asked why Trump weren't briefed on reports that Russia offered bounties. But the Defense Department has explained there's no corroborating evidence to support it. A military source said there was a raid in Afghanistan this year, found a large amount of cash. A fighter said in a subsequent interrogation, the money came from Russia, but it was not easily verified. In fact, it wasn't even a piece of intelligence that made its way into briefings for senior leaders at the Pentagon. U.S. officials are now concerned that because of the leaked story, Russia will try to cover its tracks on this so-called bounty scheme Further, the Russians and other actors, including the Iranians, have been interfering in Afghanistan for some time in an effort to harm U.S. interests, Fox News is told, by some scumbag who wants to damage the president's foreign policy. Meanwhile, the NSA has dissented over the Russian bounty intel, denies it. The Wall Street Journal has reported the National Security Agency strongly dissents from other intel agencies' assessment that Russia paid bounties for killing U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. The journal cites people familiar with the matter, does not give much detail, but the story is newsworthy as the NSA has dissented from other agencies in the past over allegations against Russia. A January 2017 intelligence assessment that concluded Russian interference in the 2016 election on President Trump's behalf was given high confidence by the CIA and FBI, but the NSA gave it only moderate confidence, and of course, it turned out to be complete rubbish. Meanwhile, a woman walks into a live CNN broadcast with a fake news sign. What could be more appropriate? And after all, think about it. We've been told for years that Russia was behind Trump, that Russia was responsible for his victory over Hillary Clinton. We heard it 24/7 for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, Russia is switching sides and out to kill American forces in Afghanistan. The Democrats are talking out of both sides of their mouth at the same time. They're on both sides of every issue, hoping only something will stick. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, this is what Susan Rice was babbling on about again, too, Trump is doing the will of our arch enemy. And I was baffled because I remember Obama, when he was running against Romney, said the 1980s called, they want their foreign policy back. Russia is essentially not the big enemy. It's not the danger. And in that respect, Obama was right. And Susan Rice is obviously forgetting because she was the national security advisor. So she would have told Obama, yeah, Russia's not a threat. But now she suddenly changes it. You're right, Jim. This is talking out of their both sides of their mouths. This is doublespeak. You and I had talked about this when it broke. This did not happen. This was fake news. We said it at the time. If it was probably acquired from some deranged half-wit lost in the desert from a prisoner interrogation. But you know what? That's not the CIA or any other agency's realm. That's the combatant commander's realm and the Department of Defense and the Defense Intelligence Agency. They interview prisoners and detainees that have been engaging in kinetic operations against the United States, not the CIA. The CIA are there, but it is the military who control the environment. So Trump needs to go directly to the military, the combatant commanders, the commander of U.S. Central Command, to see exactly what's going on in Afghanistan or the prisoner interrogations. And he will see exactly that there's nothing there. There's no Russian story. This was a tiny speck of fly shit in the pepper shaker, and it probably didn't exist at all. It was probably, if it was manufactured intentionally by a U.S. government, a military person that wants conflict with Russia. The Democrats want conflict with Russia. They have since the 1990s, and the Russians abandoned communism and the Soviet Union fell. The Democrats have hated them ever since because they've abandoned communism and Marxism and the Soviet style. And, you know, the one thing that Vladimir Putin and the Russians have failed to really do, and it's been to their detriment, is to be much more vocal and public relations oriented, to say to the American people, to come to Congress, I mean, to visit America and say, in their own way, this entire Russia propaganda hoax is all a hoax because the Democrats hate us because we liberated ourselves from communism and they've never forgiven us for it. We have nothing to do with harming America. We want America and Russia to have a close friendship. We want a closer relationship. We wanted that since the 1990s. We wanted to become part of NATO. We told Bill Clinton we would care for and protect Europe against any terrorist activities or things that were erupting. You know, the Russians' failure to communicate directly to the American people about a lot of our sympathies and our empathy and commonalities and such has created a vacuum that the Democrats have filled with lies. So, you know, there's a lot of failure on the Russian side to not really get aggressive in telling the truth. And it's very sad. And I understand their policy of non-interventionism in domestic affairs of other nations. But you know what? This failure by them to really address a lot of this material has left Americans susceptible to the deception operations of Democrats.
Yep.
And that's the main, and many Republicans too. We've got some of the, I mean, the Republican Congress, the Republican Study Group issued some report labeling Russia as a major enemy. All of this is rooted in a bunch of nonsense, the military industrial complex and big money that comes from big contractors like Booz Allen Hamilton, SAIC. I might add, Dov Zakheim just penned an article on the Hill talking about Russia and Russia's being a problem and an enemy and all this other stuff. And I instantly thought, wow, are we seeing another project for a new American century false flag like they did in the 9/11 attacks? Dov Zakheim, their star liar, who was my boss at Booz Allen Hamilton, that was single-handedly responsible for funneling terrorist financing money through U.S. Central Command and through the Clinton Foundation, and conspiring with Eric Holder and Landy Brewer and the law firm Covington and Burling, which is also now linked to General Flynn and his lawyers that represented him, who were from Covington and Burling. We're witnessing the deep state and all of this shenanigans that the Obama administration and these people did starting to leak out all over the place. And I think we just have to help quicken it. Jim?
Scott, I'd like to expand on that. The idea that Dov Zakheim, of all people, is writing a column in the Hill. That is startling. I mean, you've got to be right. This means something very big is afoot here in terms of trying to affect U.S. foreign policy in a way that can only be detrimental to the best interests of the American people. Well, I think it also is obvious that Zakheim is a committed Zionist, and therefore this appears to be an anti-Trump move by powerful Zionist forces who regard him as insufficiently reliable in spite of all that he has done for Israel.
I wouldn't be surprised, Jim, if they assassinate Biden and blame it on the Russians and say, you see, the Russians kill Biden because they want Trump to stay in power. So vote for Susan Rice or Michelle Obama. That could be.
Scott,
that could. I know how terrible it sounds, and I hate saying it, but we have to throw that boomerang out there in case it comes back, so we know how to catch it.
Completely awful. Don, your thoughts here as we tie down the first hour.
Yeah. Oh, it is really something. The lies and things that are out there. It really shows how bad it is. And for Dov Zakheim, he's still walking the streets. I mean, there's no justice in this in modern America. It seems like the liars, the bigger the lie, the stronger the person is. Anyway, this is the first hour on July 6th of Truth versus News, and I think it's a fantastic hour. Again, we're not on TV, so we want to share this. And I will say that we give you 20/20 vision here. I mean, you're not going to get this kind of information anywhere else, so you're going to want to share it with as many people as possible. But this is excellent material. So thank you, Scott and Jim. And we got another hour to go, and it's even hotter than this one. So you all want to come back. So we'll see you in a bit.
If I say all lives matter, I'm a racist. If I stand for my flag, I have to apologize for it. I'm not allowed to go to church, but I can burn churches to the ground. I'm not allowed to open my own business, but I can go loot and destroy other people's businesses. If I wear a badge, have a gun, and I'm dressed in blue, I'm a racist pig. But if I walk around destroying my city with bricks and masks, I'm considered a peaceful protester. I'm not allowed to peacefully protest the lockdown at my capital, but I can go destroy and graffiti my capital. I'm not allowed to go to the park to play TV t-ball with my family, but I can destroy the park. I'm not allowed to protect our historical monuments and history, but I can go tear them down and have them land on top of people. I'm not allowed to have an opinion on racial matters because I'm white, but if I don't have an opinion on it, I'm the reason why people are oppressed. I can go riot in the streets with the BLM, but if I go to a Trump rally, COVID-19 magically appears. Does anyone else not see the hypocrisy in all of this? I am done with your bullshit.